Autumn is in the air. Middle of October, summer's gone. Dr. Mike, Josh, Dave's out this week. Welcome back, everybody, to the KrakCast. We've got some news to discuss. As always, we're going to start with interesting news from the university here in Krakow, Jagiellonian University. They announced this week that they're going to have most of their classes remotely, organize most of them remotely, just as they did during COVID. However, this time, very different reason. It's because they say they're afraid of the energy bill, the heating bill that they would get if they conducted traditional classes. And so they're telling everybody to get their computer set up, Dr. Mike. This sounds really unfair.
Yeah, it's like, so, instead of the university paying for the power, you as the poor student will have to pay for that power. When you break it down that way, like, you'll be paying a few extra zlotys to keep your laptop charged, of course, but still, you're losing the university experience one more year. And I still believe, in-class teaching interaction is a lot more beneficial than a virtual online course.
And presumably they're going to charge, for the students they do charge, the weekend students, presumably they're going to charge the same amount?
Yes, the same amount.
So how do you justify this? We're saving big time, but you need to pay the same.
Well, the whole thing is they're not saving. They're just cutting back on costs that are going up right now. But I think the UJ last year or something like that, their electricity energy bill was a little under 20 million. And this year it's looking like it's going to cost more like 180 million. So, a bit of an increase. So they're cutting costs wherever they can. But the truth is, switching off the lights more often is going to save you 5, 10, 15%. There are so many things that, computer labs, servers, refrigerators that drain power constantly that you can't turn off. And that's probably 50% of their energy use anyway. So, cutting off 5, 10% here, but by not having the lights on in the student, lecture halls, I don't think it's going to make that. They'll save money, but it's not going to make it that big.
By the way, they're not the only university to make the same announcement. Universities across the country are they're lining up. And I don't think Jagiellonian was the first, but it seems that other universities feel more comfortable doing the same thing now that they're not going to be the only place doing it.
There are a lot of businesses that want to do the same thing. At my job, they've been talking about it, but then they realized, well, if we're working remotely from home, the computer that we have on in the office still needs to be on, that we can access it at home. So it's still, using a couple hundred watts an hour. Just because the lights are off, the computers, which use more power, still need to be on. All the servers still need to be on. They realize. But
you say businesses. I mean, I don't want to give away anything, but you work for the government, really.
Government related, yeah.
But isn't the government the only? I mean, I was thinking about this. The real businesses can't get away with this. Only the government can do this. Only the government can say, screw you, give us your money, we're going to give you an inferior product and you can shut the hell up. I mean, supermarkets, gas stations, cinemas, everybody has the same issue with energy prices and heating bills, but they're not saying, sorry, we're going to cut corners that are going to impact the customer experience and just deal with it.
They might start, though. I know.
How?
Well, the funny thing is, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was an alert put out that they thought there might be a series of brownouts in Poland. It was like they calculated one day between like 5 and 10 and 7 in the afternoon, there might not be enough power, and they actually asked large institutions to cut back immediately on power. And in malls, they basically turned off like elevators and escalators just to cut back a little bit on power usage. And I can think at strategic moments they might do that in shopping centers. It would be only they'll switch the lights off in the main hallways. They'll turn the heating down.
That's like a token symbolic gesture. I mean, lights is not where the money goes. It's heating, right? That's
a lot of heating. Well, if it's it depends on what kind of heating you have. If it's gas heating, gas prices have gone up, but I think less than power electricity. Then there are heat pumps, which are a little more efficient. The heating is also something you can control more. You can lower the temperature by a few degrees, and that can be a huge change on the amount of energy you need to get to that temperature in a large building. So it might be a little more efficient at saving money that way.
Anybody want to make bold predictions about private businesses making kind of like, shocking adjustments because of energy bills that they're going to tell customers, sorry, we can't provide basic services for you? Or sorry, it's so cold in here, but we just can't afford to turn the heat on.
Well, I can imagine that happening, yes. I mean, though I have a strange feeling it might not be as bad as it's being presented right now. I'm not saying everything's going to be peachy this winter, but I think a lot of people it's getting maybe to the point of hysteria that it's going to cost a lot more, but then just things are going to cost more. Unfortunately, that's just the way it's going to look. But it's not going to be to the point where we're going to be freezing to death and starving to death, and everything's going to be closed.
We are headed for some dark times this winter, I think, and a lot of university students will. Well, you know what? Now that I think about it, maybe a lot of university students are kind of pleased about this at the same time.
Well, I would have thought also you've got the situation where if if you're not actually like, say, a resident native of Krakow, and all the classes are going online, what's the point in spending money on renting an apartment and heating it when you just can stay with your parents?
Good point.
There's part of that. The only thing is the university isn't making all classes what's called distance learning, or I know with the weekend students, it's going to be like every other weekend will be a distance class or virtual class. So they'll still have to come in once in a while. And if you're student living, you might still have to be in the city once in a while for certain classes, certain what's it called, interactive classes, labs and stuff like that will still be in person. So you're still going to have to live in a city for parts of your education. So there's no point in renting out an apartment only 1 week or 3 days a week or something like that. So that's still, in a way, the students might be happy because they'll, can sleep in more often, but they can still live in a city and enjoy the social aspect of being a student. But I think they're generally losing out, and the university is not going to save that much money.
Let's talk about nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
As long as we're talking about all the good
news.
news.
We're living in an urban center, so
Two issues here. One, this week, this is Dr. Mike. I'm having trouble finding out who to believe here because it's a big story, but one side is talking about it like it's a fact. The other side is not talking about it at all. Reports this week that Poland has approached the American government about the possibility of hosting American nuclear weapons and, installing them here somehow. That's huge. But strangely, the American State Department seems to not know anything about this. Like, who are you again?
What I heard was the State Department said we have no plans or anything like that to move our stockpiles around in Europe, something like that. They didn't say that Poland had approached them and they were saying no. They just said at this time we have no plans to make any changes along those when it comes to our policies for nuclear weapons in Europe. The question is, Poland just might be mentioning it to remind Moscow that there's a nuclear power that's got our back, so maybe just take a step back and calm down a little bit there. Russia.
I wonder how that goes over in Washington. That Poland's talking trash about their nuclear armed buddy who's going to help them out.
But the truth
this is how wars get started.
No, wars get started when it's a delicate balance because you can't completely play weak as well either.
When you set your tanks on the road to Kiev, I think is one way of starting a war.
Exactly. So, you always have to present to your potential opponent that, there will be consequences if you try anything. We have the potential, or we have the backing, we have the allies. So, you have to show strength and force to a certain degree, but without escalating as well and provoking the other side. It's a delicate balance, but you can't just sit back.
John, your president just came out last week saying that he seems to be quite happy to ratchet up the rhetoric when it comes to nuclear saber rattling.
Hashtag not my president, which is apparently a perfectly fine thing to say because that's what I heard for 4 years. So now I can say it.
Now that nuclear weapons are actually being talked about seriously, it's like no.
But still, Mike, this is the kind of thing that they talk about behind closed doors before they go.
Well,
front of media,
for all we know, there are here, but you don't actually advertise the fact.
The thing is, they're not saying what I'm trying to say is they're not talking about to actually get it done one way or the other. It's more just to make sure it's out there in the ether. In the same way they might say and we bought an extra couple of, F-16s and F-35s, and here we have a little more tanks. You never talk about the exact number of troops or equipment you have, where, deployment, strategy, and stuff like that.
Okay, let's just ignore the American response or the lack of American response for the moment and just focus on this. Is it a good idea, or what do you think about Poland hosting American nukes?
Tactically, it makes from a tactical standpoint, it doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't make a difference if those bombs are in Poland or in Turkey or in Germany. Because these are unguided bombs that what they have left in Europe. There's aren't like missile silos or anything. They're not talking about that. It's basically bombs that you could stick on fighter jets or on planes and fly them over a target. So, if the plane is here or in Ramstein, that's, 20-minute difference. Plus, Ramstein is further away, so by the time, if Moscow fires some nukes or some rockets at Ramstein, there's enough time for those jets to get off in the air to, hit targets. While if it's in Poland, that's a fewer minutes for reaction time. So if they're here in Poland, the Russians might be able to destroy those centers where we actually.
So you could argue that Poland is too close.
To a certain extent as well. Yeah, it's unless they're literally on the jets already loaded and ready to go, and then you can say that that means it's over the target in Russia 10 minutes earlier.
Does Russia have missiles on Kaliningrad?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well, I think that's a good reason for Poland.
And they brought in more like 4 or 5 years ago. And they're not saying it's the Iskander missiles, whatever they're called, the ones that could hit. It's like 500, 600 kilometer range, and they're the ones that can have nuclear warheads on them, but you don't know if they have them or not. But the likelihood is that they do.
We should kind of get the Russians out of Kaliningrad, really, I think. Shouldn't we?
How do you, the Polish politicians, by supporting this, they're basically making Poland a nuclear target as well. How do you put a positive spin on that and sell that to your voters? Like, this is going to protect us. We're also going to be a target for the first wave of Russian missiles, but just never mind that.
Either way.
Why would it be a target either way?
First of all, when you look at the doctrine that Russia has when it comes to using nuclear weapons, for them, besides being a weapon when it comes to retaliation, it's also, unlike in the U.S., it's looked at as a tactical weapon as well. Using a nuke as a tactical weapon it's bonkers in most scenarios. But the Russians actually, their doctrine has adopted that. So they would, if they started an invasion, they thought they needed to, they would use tactical nuclear weapons. If they're losing and they need to get out, they would use tactical nuclear weapons. While the U.S. has, basically said before that, that's just not how it makes no sense to use a nuclear bomb as a tactical weapon. So Poland is, if Poland is invaded, then they could use tactical nuclear weapons. Like in Ukraine right now, there's talk about it, but when you look at it from a strategical standpoint, it makes no sense to use nuclear weapons for the Russians in Ukraine. It doesn't help them win anything. Because there's no single large group of Ukrainian soldiers they can get rid of with one bomb. There's no single infrastructure. There's no because with a tactical nuclear weapon, you blow up something and then you can maneuver your forces through it or past it. There's no scenario like that right now in Ukraine where the Russians could do that. And they drop a bomb on Kiev or any other city, urban area.
Kyiv, Mike, please.
Kyiv,
Whose side are you on, really?
Kyiv, I'll say it in Polish, whatever.
Secret Putin supporter.
Then that just gives international ramifications are horrible for Russia, but they don't gain anything. So there's really no scenario where they can use nuclear weapons right now, which makes sense from a military standpoint, from a political standpoint, from an economical standpoint.
Reading about this, the one thing that was missing for me was I couldn't get a feel for what was the popular reaction to this. I heard Kaczynski talking about it, Morawiecki talking about it. I got zero sense of what the Polish public thinks about this.
At work, nobody even mentioned it. When you watched on TVN, they were kind of like, this is stupid, it's going to get us killed. But they also didn't really go into it.
I have to assume it would be mostly negative, like, no thanks.
Only on TVN, I saw some negative comments, and everywhere else, they didn't even really mention it too much. But bear in mind, this has only been 2 days. So
Which is weird, because it's de facto your country going nuclear, essentially. So you'd think it would be for more debate, but I just didn't see anybody talking about it, but I think it would be... I don't think the public wants this. That's my opinion, I guess.
Were there nuclear weapons in Poland during the communist era?
Question. I'm not sure. I believe it was discussed, but Poland said no. But I'm not 100% sure. That's when the U.S. was putting nuclear arms in Germany and stuff like that. I think Poland was also considered, but I don't hold me to it. But I think Poland said no.
Related topic, also in the news this week, lots of officials, both here locally in Krakow and nationally, discussing the idea of mass distribution of iodine pills. Iodine, what's the Polish for iodine? Potash?
Well, that's potassium iodine, because that's the form that is...
Iodine pills. Remind us, Dr. Mike, what iodine does for us in the event of a nuclear attack?
Makes us feel better. That's when you get right down to it, there are legitimate medical reasons to take iodine pills in the case of radiation exposure, but when it comes right down to it, it's more of there's bombs going off. This is something you can concentrate on. You have power over. You think it might help. Helps you focus. But the truth is, because iodine is used by the thyroid gland to make certain hormones that regulate your metabolism. And the thyroid is constantly picking up iodine that you eat, you ingest. So if there's any irradiated iodine in the environment, that goes straight to your thyroid becomes exposed to that radiation, which means you have a higher likelihood of cancer down the line. Or your thyroid might get seriously damaged at that moment if it's a huge dose. If you take iodine that is not irradiated, a large enough dose that basically packs in the max amount of iodine that could be in your thyroid, so it doesn't absorb anymore. And that's, the pill you take lasts you for about 24, 48 hours, something along those lines.
In normal times, like in non-nuclear war times, what does the inventory of iodine look like typically? I mean, do we have enough for everybody, or is it something we have to make?
To be honest,
I have no idea.
I don't know if there's enough. There probably was, back in the Cold War, always a supply or something like that. The truth is, iodine only helps if the explosion happened far away enough that basically the radiation doesn't bother you, but there might be you might get a whiff of radiation in the air in the next day or two from some fallout while traveling through a zone that you take the pill. It's not going to save you from any other types of radiation or anything like that.
Not too many better ways to start a huge public panic than start handing out iodine pills.
I just don't understand why it doesn't, besides the whole, like I said, it gives people hope that there's something they can do in a scenario where there's really nothing you can do. So that's psychological aspect of it. But I think that's kind of, when you put it up to the other side, that when people hear that the iodine pills are being handed out, they start to panic. So
sure. Well, why wouldn't they?
Well, look, I think there's been, there's been a sort of lowish level but ongoing kind of rumbling narrative about the possibility of Putin using tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, and if things kind of ratchet up and NATO gets involved, then that might also spill over into Poland. And although it's never really been a kind of, oh my God, shock horror, this is definitely going to happen like in the next 24 hours, it has been a fairly constant almost since the special military operation began in February. So I think what this is about is there's going to be a general background level of unease,
radiation,
of unease and discomfort about this issue within the Polish population, and it's like, yeah, look, they keep talking about this, but what are you guys? What's our government doing to help us? So just by announcing that they have the option to because I mean they were banging these all around when Chernobyl went up, weren't they?
Yeah,
and actually yanking out people's thyroids, if I recall.
And even then it didn't make that much sense because they found out about the increased radiation levels after time had already passed.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like handing them out really didn't make much sense anyway.
But Mike, look, doctors give antibiotics for colds, don't they?
Basically.
I mean, it's not about the science, duh.
But yeah, it's about the psychological kind of, they're doing something. But the truth is, if there is a nuclear war, it really depends on the scenario. If we're talking about explosions, over Krakow, or if we're talking explosions, a few hundred kilometers away in Ukraine, you don't think about going to the pharmacy to get your pills. Think about getting out of the zone where, fallout or radiation.
So if there's an explosion over Krakow, my iodine pills got vaporized, basically. So it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. It really depends on where the explosion is and where you are and where the fallout or radiation.
It's also worth bearing in mind that, I think, it's too often thought that, a nuclear weapon involves huge numbers of people dying as a result of radiation. But actually, of course, the original reason for a nuclear weapon is because it's an incredibly powerful explosion. And it's actually, it's the destructive force of the explosive capability of nuclear weapons that is their tactical advantage, if you like, and radiation is an unfortunate byproduct, and it also makes a difference the type of weapon, because if it's something that kind of is designed to detonate deep underground, like an earthquake bomb or something like that, there'll be very little radiation, but there will be a great deal of damage. Whereas if it's something that is sent to explode in mid-air above the target, then there'll be huge amounts of radiation that will be blown hither and thither by the wind.
Just one more thing. I don't want to talk about nuclear war too much here, but just one thing. Put aside the geopolitical consequences and that aspect of it. I wonder what the Russians or Putin is thinking. Would you ever set off a nuclear bomb on your own territory, or what you hope will become your territory? Isn't that how ridiculous is that?
Well, that's where most testing happened for most countries.
Well, in the middle of friggin' Kazakhstan or whatever, back when it was the Soviet Union.
Kazakhs.
I mean, you're never going to use this. Well, not never, but it's going to be decades or a century before you use this area.
Actually, no.
again.
Hiroshima, people live there right now. Is already. It's
Fair point.
The truth is, it really depends on what kind of materials are radiated, what kind of bomb it is, and how you react later to what was there. The fallout.
Aren't the nuclear weapons? One more question. Aren't the nuclear weapons we have today much more powerful than the Fat Man and Little Boy from World War II?
Also produce less radiation, like the thermonuclear.
Although they're the healthy form of nuclear weapons.
It's like hydrogen bombs.
The safe form.
But it also depends, if they load it up with cobalt or something like that, which,
Okay, let's move on.
But
It's been far too long since we talked about toilets, so we're going to fix that today. Dr. Mike, the stupidity never ends with the conservator, which the listeners may recall. Conservator is an office, a position in Krakow, actually in many cities, that's responsible for preserving the cultural, artistic heritage of a city. They have veto power over development plans and whatnot to try to preserve the traditional character and appearance of the city. And the conservator is getting involved in toilet renovation in Nowa Huta. Dr. Mike, take it away.
There are several lavatories or public toilets in the Nowa Huta area by the Karakowski and Prodnik Street that, the city has put out basically, a contract bidding war, to fix them up. But for some of them, the conservator has gotten involved, and whoever signs up to fix them has to maintain their architectural design because of the tiling on the floor and on the walls and the lastrico, which I'm not even exactly sure what that is called in English. It's like the glass tiling or something like that needs to be protected from, Nowa Huta, because Nowa Huta is a beautiful example of brutal.
So are these like retro bathrooms or what?
Retro bathrooms that they have to basically fix up and, not only put in new toilets and water faucets and soap dispensers, but they have to promise to protect the tiling and the colors and the design of the actual lavatories or public.
Don't they have better things to protect and preserve than toilets?
Yeah,
and
usually
no matter
the people who are using public toilets aren't exactly the ones that usually can walk in there. This is a fine.
No, I mean how impressive. No, I have to say I haven't seen this toilet. How artistically and creatively impressive must it be to deserve this kind of protection?
You know what? I kind of laugh about it, but then again, when you're in London and you're walking in some kind of tube station or Victorian era gardens where they have public toilets, it's almost pleasant to walk in and see the design from 100 years ago, when it came to
walk in the toilets, and I don't think it's pleasant is not the word that's going to come to mind. But
say, assuming that it's maintained properly and cleaned, it's just interesting to see a different design.
Sure, that's true.
And when you think about this is authentic. This has been here for like 120 years, and it's this is pretty cool. Plumbing and stuff.
The idea of a public toilet that's 120 years old does not fill me with some kind of desire to go check it out.
There was like one. I just want to mention this, like since Victorian era, there's the Queen Victoria building in Sydney, which is like a shopping mall center, and they have toilets there as well, which were of the era. I think they was opened in 1901 or something along those lines, and it has the weirdest urinals. It's basically four urinals where you're staring at each other. It's
like a sort of a cloverleaf effect.
Exactly, it's a cloverleaf. The pipe is right in the middle.
How you doing, guys?
How's it hanging?
It's high enough that you don't see the other guy's business, but it's still a weird sensation if it's all
junk. I think is the word you're looking for.
That's the medical term, yes.
And it's beautifully, ornately designed Victorian era plumbing and ceramics.
Actually, now that you mention it, Mike, I remember at the Budapest Opera House, I think it was. They have something similar. It's the toilets preserved from the 1870s or whatever it was, and it is stepping back in time. It really is interesting to see how they pissed back then, I guess. But I'm having trouble believing that anything in Nowa Huta is worth this level of intervention and presumably cost.
It sounds
as
like
well.
You're pissing away money here. Yeah,
pissing away money. Oh, it's too easy, too easy. Let's talk about one more thing before we go here. Our favorite city council member, Łukasz Weintuch. Now, we were talking about him last week during the Roger Waters drama because Łukasz Weintuch basically, I think it's fair to say that he led the movement to get Roger Waters uninvited, or whatever the proper word is. He was central to what happened, essentially. And Weintuch, over the last several years, actually for as long as he's been on the city council, he makes the news for weird reasons. He always has interesting comments and leads odd crusades in favor of this or against that, and on and on and on. Well, he's back in the news. The guy cannot stay out of the news. I think he's addicted to the spotlight now. He's taken up the cause, at the request of one of his constituents, by the way, the cause of doing something about the Cantor, the money exchange office at the airport, which apparently offers unfavorable rates, rip-off currency exchange rates.
Like every airport in the world.
Exactly. And Weintuch is going to name and shame and get something done and correct this injustice. Where do we start with this?
Well, first of all, I don't think the airport is technically on Krakow city grounds anyway, though there might be some kind of loophole there, which it's the city airport, the city council also has some say in what goes on there. But, you said constituent. Yeah, it might be a constituent, but I doubt that that's a constituent that actually lives in that area because that's already like the next gmina over. But I think it's hilarious. It's like everything at the airport is more expensive. That's kind of the whole...
Yeah, coffee costs 22 zlotys. That's okay. But the fact that your dollar or pound is 10% off the market rate, that's outrageous.
I mean, every traveler knows that at the airport exchange... I mean, first of all, very fewer people now exchange money than they used to. You pay, with your phone, with your card, whatever. Usually exchange rates are better. You don't need cash so often anymore. And the only people that exchange money at the airport are either really, really dumb or really, really desperate.
Exactly.
And basically, that's how business works. It's like there's a need. Somebody really wants it bad enough, and this is a place where I can, charge more. You're buying money at an exchange place, so it's just more expensive at the airport, just like every other product at the airport is more expensive.
When you're a captive audience, whether at a sporting event or at an airport or in a cinema, there's a reason why the popcorn costs that much. You have no choice, essentially. And it's the same thing at work here. And so I really... We kind of make fun of Łukasz Weintuch, but I will not dispute that he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing, and I just don't see how a smart guy falls for something like this, how he doesn't understand immediately that there are reasons why the rates are what they are.
I mean, he either didn't think about it too much, or he's completely aware of this, but he knows that a lot of other people won't think about it and just gets him a few clicks online and just, is a name out there, and people think of him as the one who wants to keep prices reasonable and down. But the truth is, the funny thing is that the airport also said that, we don't dictate the prices in these places. We just rent out the area.
Exactly. It's a private company running the Cantor, right?
Though there's a second side to that coin. I mean, the other side of that coin is the fact that one of the reasons...
Cantor and coin. I see what you did there.
One of the reasons it's so expensive at airports is because the airport authority charges a lot for that space there. So, they're not directly causing everything to be that expensive there, but the businesses running there have to up the prices if they want to, make any profit.
Yeah, see also motorway service areas, which, people used to complain in the UK about how expensive stuff was in motorway service area. And that's because, the argument being that if you run a motorway service area, you've got a license to print money. So therefore, the local authority charges an outrageous sum as a license fee. So
actually,
so it's the customer that pays.
Łukasz Weintuch, he should understand himself, because in a way, he's kind of a landlord in his capacity as a city council member. He knows something about how much the city charges cafes to use the space in the Rynek. He knows probably how much the city charges merchants to rent space in the Sukiennica. He understands that it's worth more because of the foot traffic, so they charge more, and that's why the cafes and retailers in the Sukiennica have to charge more for their products. It's he's on both sides of this argument. It seems he's complaining about it, but he's also in a sense kind of a landlord as well, charging these people God knows how much they have to pay for these days. So I just pick and choose your battles carefully. As a politician, and I think he's chosen very poorly. But again, Dr. Mike, like I said, I think he loves the feel of being in the spotlight. I think that's what it is.
I think as soon as one of his constituents or somebody here complains about something, he jumps on that right away. We
should invite him. Remember, he was supposed to come to the studio, but COVID happened. And it never worked out. I think we should invite him back because I think he can't turn down an invitation. And we'll just cross our fingers and hope he doesn't listen to our previous shows where we were talking about him and making fun of him and criticizing him. Yeah, maybe. Well, all right, we're going to bring things to a close on that note. KrakCast.pl is the website, of course. Check out all of our back episodes there, almost 430 episodes, many of which are actually worth listening to. So please do us a favor, click, share, all the usual stuff to please the algorithm in the sky. And we'll see you next time on the KrakCast.